thought this was a meeting about the Palladium Alliance. We're going to bring it back.
I'm so sorry, Linus. I'll just say no.
Better than ever. Let's bring it back.
We're probably live at the moment. Make sure Okay, to our digital audience, we're going to go live in about a minute, so hang in there with us while I try to manage these guys.
You could never be managed. You got to tell me for live. I can't be ripping on him if we're live.
I'm not believing that will stop you. We are actually live. We're just waiting for it's time. Now we're for reals. Welcome back to Live from MJSA Expo. I'm Andrea Hill, your host for these sessions. And in this next hour, we're going to be talking about all things metals. And I have three great guests to bring you this conversation. So before we get started and I introduce them, I just want to remind you that we are at MJSA Expo, which is in the Javits in New York. It is the only trade show that exists for the makers and suppliers of jewelry. And if you are anywhere in the region and you're not at the show, you really should be, because the partners you need to run a successful jewelry business are exhibiting here, and this is where you need to be. So now we still have the show going on until 1 p.m. tomorrow, so you can be here from, I think, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow if you didn't get here today. All right, so my guests for this conversation are Ken Babayan with DHL, and Linus Drogs with AU Enterprises, and Dave Szyminski with United Precious Metals. And I cannot make any promises about their behavior. They tend to be a rowdy bunch. And people have said to me, what could you talk about for metals for like an hour? And I say, have you ever been to a single Santa Fe symposium? You can talk about metals for 3 days. There's an awful lot to say about metals. But real quick, give a plug for the new Santa Fe symposium, and then we'll start talking about metals.
So the new symposium, the jewelry symposium, is May 14th, 15th, and 16th in Minneapolis this year. We're limited to 100 seats, so sign up soon. Early registration ends on the 15th. We've got 17 great presenters covering a vast topic on metals and processes. So yes, come and join us. It's the premier technical event for jewelry manufacturing in the entire world.
Excellent. So, and at only 100 seats, there's some scarcity for you. People do need to register. All right, so I guess I'll kick this off by asking you, what's stressing you these days when it comes to your metal world and metal manufacturing? We'll start with the stresses because we're going to end on the fun stuff.
I think the biggest stress right now is the real confusion in the marketplace of recycled metal. What actually the definition is, how it's categorized, how we have manufacturers asking for it, how they really want to be, when they want to certify, they want a green, they want a sustainable metal, non-conflict. There's a lot of miscommunication in the marketplace, and it's creating stress for metal suppliers and refiners, probably for Ken also, because what happens is we are getting these requests, and to be honest with you, we just don't feel there's enough recycled metal in the pipeline under the current definitions for everyone to have it.
Okay, so we'll dig deep into recycled metals. Let's hear each of your stresses, and then we'll.
I think that's
yours.
I mean, that's a pretty good one. There's no question. People are asking questions. They're not sure what recycled means. I get that question a lot. When you say post-consumer, that usually helps saying that. But there's still more questions, and I agree. There's no question that the pipeline is. We happen to have another division that helps us with the goal that supplies us. But if you were to go out on the marketplace, you're going to have some trouble finding recycled material. And then not only that, you're going to have them actually wanting, because when we go through the audit every year, the vendor has to sign an affidavit stating, this is what we've been supplying. That's part of our audit that we have to give to SCS Global. And so that's also a problem. We're getting people saying, yeah, we'll give you all the recycled you want. And then when it comes time to sign the paper, they don't want to sign it. So like, what is that? So we're having to do that prior and all that. It's a work in progress. I think it's not going away. Definitely not going away. So I think, it took us a couple of years to be 100%. We were not 100% when we first started. Now we are. And maintaining that's a challenge. And the rules are changing. It's not always the same. So we're getting more strict. They're getting more strict. And,
so we'll dig into that. We'll dig into definitions and, really try to help people understand that recycled metal aspect. On the manufacturing front, what's pushing your buttons these days?
Well, it's the same situation on the consumer side, it is the supplier side. So you put a program together, the designer wants to position themselves to use completely recycled material. And now I have to contact Ken or Dave and put a program together and say, okay, this is what we need and this is what we project is going to be our requirement for this collection or these delivery cycles. And depending upon how they manage their supply stream, I may or may not get material. And then that starts the cascade of backlog of delivery dates, and then you look like you're unreliable or undependable. And the guys, their hands are tied. It's not as you can just go out and create that kind of supply stream.
All right, so let's start with, and this is a big deal because people are more and more concerned about responsible jewelry. And note that I said responsible. We really cannot use the term sustainable when it comes to jewelry, but responsible is the right term for that. So let's start with definitions. What constitutes recycled gold?
I'm out. No, what the current definition is basically what people say is what's called second life. So second life is basically it's been manufactured or part of the manufacturing process. So at United, we sell metals, but we're also a primary U.S. refinery. We only take business in from jewelry and pawn. That being said, we don't take in mining or electronic or dental industrial. So right off the bat, the stuff that's coming into our facility is already scrap or jewelry byproducts or the byproducts of manufacturing. So under that definition of recyclable, we feel like it's being recycled. I don't necessarily agree with the term recycled metal for numerous reasons. I think to be honest with you, the language police will get involved soon, and they're going to call it reprocessing. They're going to call it redefined. They're going to call it repurposed, because that's really what it is. I think I was quoted in JCK through Rob Bates magazine last year as one of the top 40 quotes. And I said, when people think of recycled, they think of garbage. And when they think of those blue totes that they take out from their house and their apartments, and it's going to be made into another form. Where a lot of it's really not made into another form. The gold, it's really what happens. It's going to be repurposed into either raw products or into something that Ken does at David Fell. They do a lot of or casting grain or fine bullion factored in the marketplace. So I really think, like I said, once the language police get involved, I think we really need to really go away from the term recycle.
Well, I mean, right there, people don't understand the difference. Like gold, they say, well, it's not all post-consumer. Well, where do you want all those industrial shavings and pieces that didn't get made into a piece of jewelry to go? So there's industrial and there's post-consumer, and that's already the first level of confusion.
That is true. So like for David Fell, we make our division, DHF Technical Products, makes sputtering targets. This is gold that is made for the thin film deposition coating. So that goes out to the consumer. The consumer uses that product, and this is all pure gold, by the way. It just happens to get lucky that way, but it's pure gold, and it goes out. They use their product, and they only use about a certain percentage, maybe 40 to 60%, comes back to us in clean form, really, and then it comes to, that's post-consumer. So that would be one generation over. So that's what we use. I mean, it's that simple. And that's deemed like recycled.
Now, both of you are SCS certified.
Yes.
You guys want to explain for the audience what is involved in being SCS certified? Because then we'll talk about, refiners that are selling recycled metal but are not certified, and there's different definitions beyond the ones we've just talked about.
So there's certifications, they're called literally third-party certifications, or they take place in an audit form where they're basically going to evaluate when we say we're green and clean, that what happens, our metal is green and clean. So you bring this third party in, SCS is one of the leaders of the industry when it comes in. They'll certify your metal as a certain percentage of recycled, fine gold, fine silver, fine platinum, fine palladium. So we've partnered up with SCS probably for the last 12 to 15 years. We're one of the first ones in on this. And really what it is, it's basically to tell people, we're 100% recyclable, as in from their audit process when they come in, that they're going to go through our process. They're going to pull examples of lots and process things that we've done inside our building to make sure it is what it is and said what it says. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. Someone sends us a bag of jewelry scrap. We know it's scrap gold. It's rings, it's chains, we can identify it. Now say that same manufacturer or retail jeweler melts that into a bottle. Okay, so now what happens is they melt it into a bottle. Well, it comes in, how do we know it came from jewelry scrap? How do we know it came from chains? So then what happens is we'll get what's called, each company has their own process. We'll get like what's called a metal source document, almost like a mini affidavit asking the jewelry manufacturer or our customer, where did this come from? And then what happens is it came from rings or chains or byproducts of manufacturers because they wanted to melt it. So then what happens is we'll take pictures, we'll make a note out of it. So then when the auditing firm comes in once a year or once every 2 years or 3 years, and they pull that lot and they say, this is a bar, how do you know it is? Then we go back to the paperwork and the documentation we have from our customer to say, this is what we did. And we try to cover ourselves, to be honest with you, the best we can. So when those questions do arise, we have actually documentation that backs it up.
And one of the things these guys are trying to prevent is illegal gold making it into the supply chain in bar form, through channels that they're not necessarily in control of. By the way, for those of you who don't know, SCS Global is one of the leading organizations that developed auditing for recycled materials across the board, plastics and all kinds of recycled materials. And then they applied their experience with doing recycled process auditing to the jewelry industry. So, were you going to say something, Linus?
Nope, I'm following along.
Just
Go ahead.
So, where might people, for refiners that are not SCS certified, where might they be getting their metals for that they're calling recycled metals? Just hypothesize.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not privy to processes of companies that are not certified. I can only tell you that like some 20 years ago, we used to get requests about being, is your material, we started getting these requests some 20 years ago about, is your stuff coming from recycled sources? And we would say, yeah, because we were refining. It was that simple. And we wrote a letter and a letter was signed and, that was fine. Everyone was happy. Come 5 years from now when we started this thing, now there's, like you say, there's third party, obviously United's been doing it a lot longer. But there's people always jumping in. So it's an ever-changing game, and I don't think we're at our final resting spot by any means. I think you're going to see a lot more stringent processes, and the audit will become, because right now it's a desktop audit, and then they come in and they will come and visit you to do the audit. So at first it was desktop.
And just like Ken said, it is very confusing because what happens is even when the auditing firm comes in, and SCS is one of the leaders. I mean, if you go to Home Depot, there's stuff they'll have their logo everywhere on what they've recycled, on what they've deemed as recycled. But also you have auditors come in, we're spending a lot of our time educating. So these certifications also cost a lot of money for us. So what happens, we're spending a lot of money so we can have all these, different certifications. And what happens is, what people have to understand is, as we go down this path, the metal gets more expensive because we have to hire extra people to do compliance, to chase this paperwork, to follow through. So like I always tell when a designer comes up to us, I'm like, at one time we used to sell you gold, let's say for an example, $2 an ounce. Now we're selling it at $10 an ounce, and we're not making $8 profit. We're making the same profit that we made at 2 is that we do at 10. But what happens, everyone's gone down this road, which we don't have a problem with, but it takes a lot, as Ken said, so like that, just to get all our teams, everyone aligned on this, because it is a big deal for us.
It's a rigorous process.
To be honest, it's not really the same game because the people that are not doing it are still selling $2, $3 gold.
But they could
Right?
be getting paid.
And I mean, just not everyone's on board just yet. So we're like at the birthplace in my mind. This is the beginning. And so, yeah, there's a select few companies, but you can go, where I'm from LA, downtown LA, and you can pick up gold for $2, $3. I'm sure you can go down
Down on 47th,
yeah,
you can
go
get it
down to
too.
47th and pick it up. That's
When we talk about the fact that it's going to take the entire jewelry industry to pull together to get more transparent supply chains, I know that I personally really respect the leadership that your companies have shown in putting yourselves out there to be SCS certified in your metals, because they're preventing illegal metals from getting into supply chains. You're working on making sure that people know what they're buying. But it is a burden to be a leader in that space because it does make it more expensive. What's the thing with, you were telling me, calling recycled metals what's coming out of central banks, the bars and the bullion?
Well, what happens is you could just take, if you're looking for post-consumer, okay, so if you're looking for scrap and everyone wants recycled metal, well, there's only so much scrap you can get to basically sell it under recycled metal. So many of us, Ken was saying, like, they have another division, they make the sputtering targets where they have the byproduct, and that's already considered like 5/9 gold. I think, correct? 4. I guess we can do that now. Now we can make them too. So
I would like to change the answer to 5.
So for us, what happens is you have to buy investment bars, okay, investment grade bars. And what happens is, because we don't have enough gold coming in, we're purchasing gold from the banks. And now what happens is that gold from the banks, what happens, they're 400-ounce London LBMA bars or whatever that's sitting in someone's vault. Well, then the problem comes into play is a couple certifications have turned into, they said at one time those investment bars were considered recycled. Now they're not considering them recycled. So the problem there is, well, we need that in our feed to supply everybody. So, and the problem is they can't prove that it's not recycled or it is recycled. I mean, that's grandfathered. I mean, some of that gold could have been from 20, 30 years ago that's in that bar. So, I mean, there comes to a certain point where you almost got to say, uncle, like, you can't go back as far as some people want and trace every bit of gold. Everyone's got to understand, every bit of gold, platinum, and palladium came out of the ground. Every bit came out of the ground. And now what happens is the jewelry industry, to a point, Andrea, I was looking at a point where the ground is no good anymore.
But that's not true, because mining supports millions of people around the world. So there is responsible mining.
1,000%. But the problem is a lot of the jewelry companies, the major manufacturers, aren't even allowed to buy from them anymore. They're looking for, because they don't consider mining, they consider responsible, but not recyclable. So this is part of the problem in the industry. This confusion of what is. So when we have to buy the investment bars, now we put it in our stream, then you can almost say, well, now it's not considered recycled because we can't prove it back. We didn't know it was jewelry scrap. We didn't know what it was. So that's what makes it. So then you've taken all that supply out of the feed. So then what happens when you have a major jewelry company call, or even a small customer, and they want something, it's like, we don't know if we have what Ken was saying. And it's fine what happens when they want bullion, and bullion being fine gold or fine silver, platinum, palladium. But think about this. Now they want you to incorporate it in your products. So now you have to take all those products you manufacture, cast and grain, solder, wire, sheet, whatever findings, and now you have to find the gold to manufacture that. And I'm just saying, under the current guidelines definition, just as well as we do, It's just not there.
It's not there. One plug for tomorrow. Please join us again at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We're going to be talking about Fairmind's new credits program and how the jewelry industry can come together to support getting more responsible mines online to increase the capacity of mined metal, because that's a completely valid option for responsible metals. So when you talk about did you say the definition police? What was your phrase? The language police. What kinds of definitions would make more sense from you guys' perspective dealing with these metals? And is it different ones? Is there a term for post-consumer and a term for industrial and a term for what's coming out of the central banks, or is it just one term but it's not recycled? Like, how do you envision this evolving?
How I envision it, I think it's twofold. I think it really has to be a two-line definition. Responsibly sourced and non-conflict. I think if you run down that guidelines, and everyone's trying to beat down those guidelines, which would open up artesian mining, all this type of stuff, because all mining, refining, recycled, however you want to say it, it all needs to be in the food chain. Everyone's got to be able to supply this metal because there's just not enough of it coming from one particular part of the source. So I think if it's non-conflict, responsibly sourced, you can use terms like I said, redefine, repurpose. I think we'll be in much better shape. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. There's no question. When you talk about the fair mine and then recycled, I mean, right now, if our auditor says, that came from the mine, that's it. It's not acceptable. So how can I help? How can I be
different metal streams?
How can you be? Yeah. Then now, so if I want to be fair mined, also, then I got to have fair mined metal. Is how I'm understanding this, and that's like it's already. Yes, it is a burden, because it's higher priced. But now you're talking about segregation, 2 lines of the same product. That's just that's wild stuff. For someone, for us who's stocking stuff on the shelf, it's already costing money to stock everything.
If you're doing both, you're doubling your SKUs. So every SKU that you produce that product in, you've got 2.
We have 1,000 products on the shelf.
So what kinds of questions do designers, manufacturers, what kind of questions do you guys get asked, or what do people think they're asking for when they ask for recycled? Like, how's that conversation going? Because I know you guys spend a lot of time explaining.
I think the consumer is actually asking more for fair mine than recycled. So if you knew exactly what your supply chain was from ground, I mean, it's almost like food to table. I told you I use a lot of cooking analogies. So here we are.
I'm hungry when Linus is done talking.
So
it's all food,
farm to table. You want to know where it starts at. You want to know that the company that pulled that out of the ground is using ethical hiring practices. They're supporting their community. They're being responsible to what damage they're doing to the earth, and they followed that material all the way from the beginning to that piece of jewelry now that somebody's put in that box. To me, that makes a lot more sense than trying to wish yourself into a utopian situation of I'm being responsible.
So we know when you take a bag that could go into a landfill and you turn it into a lawn chair, that was responsible because it's not in the landfill.
Exactly.
The gold wasn't going to go to the landfill anyway, so you feel like there's a certain amount of contorting ourselves with recycled metals?
Yeah, I'm 100% on that. But once again, it comes down to if everyone's going in on this, it from a manufacturing standpoint, it's about cost. What you're going to pay for just an ounce of recycled gold. Like I said, we talk about what happens on Hill Street in Los Angeles. Get gold here on the streets of New York for $2.75 an ounce. Well, what happens once you put that recycled term or all that stuff like that, it's going higher. And the mining and like fair mine and all that stuff, and I believe there's a place for that, and I would never go against that. But the premiums on that are humongous. They're humongous. They're 50 times. They're 50 to 60 times that. So, and that,
I don't think they're that high.
They're high. We can debate that, but they're that. You can ask tomorrow on your seminar. But when you're the separate stream thing is a problem, just like Ken said. We don't want to keep separate streams. It's a problem. We internally fight about it right now in our company. It's an internal fight. It's a fight between our office, our compliance, our finance, our sales, our marketing. Because what happens is we're just trying to navigate through a maze we can't readily figure out because the definition is so vague and nobody wants to put their pad to the paper to their name. Nobody wants to make that decision that, no, this is okay. This is okay. We put requests into the certifications and ask them, and they don't get back to us because they don't really know to a point. We have competitors. Ken is a competitor of mine. We're becoming best friends because we literally have the same problem. We have other metal suppliers here. They're all the same. So it's like we can get together and now it's like a kumbaya because it's like we all feel the pain of what's going on and we all are living it. So one thing it's made, we've made friendships.
Yeah, it sounds like Dave's buying dinner tonight. So.
We don't Linus won't.
And, and I think you're talking gold and silver, but it's even a whole nother level when you start looking at platinum and palladium.
Yeah, palladium, like we started with palladium and sales are down at palladium because of the price. So I guess maybe 20 years ago, when we were developing the 950 and all that, everyone was hot on that and it was the alternative metal. But really sales, so we kind of dropped the palladium on the circuit. We don't.
Well, isn't palladium a nightmare to refine?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. But the platinum, yes, there are sources and there's not enough refining for us to be able to do that. And there's not enough targets. We have some targets that are in pure platinum, but you have to source some as well. And so finding the source is the challenge. There's no question.
And I just want to know, when does it stop? This is all about precious metals, but is copper next? Is nickel next? Is zinc next? You know what I'm saying? Like, are we going to have traceability and all that stuff from all these metals moving forward? I mean, once we get through the precious, are we going that way?
Well, yeah, because, 14 is going to be, 40, 30 some % copper. So, you're only going after, like, drive it down even farther, 10 karat. So 10 karat's 41.7 of gold, and now you're 35% copper.
I mean,
So you're almost 50-50. So now you're saying, well, I need to know it's got to be recycled. So where'd the copper come from?
I mean, the real solution is to remediate the problems at the mines. If we didn't have historic and endemic negative conditions at a lot of the mines in the world, we would not have this problem. But now that people are aware of how much environmental damage, human rights abuse happened at mines, now they want to make sure it's not happening. So you're right. The real solution isn't to, try to, audit every piece of metal that goes back through a kiln. I think that the pressure would alleviate if we could just invest in responsible mining, and it is happening.
That's going to be in the copper and the base metal world. That's going to be challenged.
It's going to be a challenge, but I don't think
you're not talking about artisanal copper mines. You're talking about big companies,
massive industrial mines.
Industrials,
but they have the money to remediate
they
as
do.
well.
But do they have the motive?
I think we're
For them,
seeing
the jewelry industry isn't going to be the motive.
No, we're seeing pressure there from automotive, from medical for some of the metals, but the consumers want to know that they're not destroying things when they buy products, and that's only going to grow. So, I mean, what blows my mind is that on the artisanal side, those artisanal miners do not have the resources, and yet they are working very hard to, farm the land once they find it and, implement the practices. They don't even have the funding, but these big industrial mines, they could fix it tomorrow if they chose to. And so we're going to still see this pressure until mining is fixed.
Listen, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but it comes back to the decisions that people make in a boardroom versus what happens on a production floor. And then what happens when we sell the metal. Because remember something about, I'll just use the term recycled metal and all this. We're not the only industry who wants it. Now the electronic industry wants it. Now the industrial industry. Well, this is the goal that we need for our industry, and now they all want it. So that's what I always tell, it's like I'll do the JCK show, and everyone's like, I had a great show, and I'm like, no, that's great. Where are we going to come up with the metal? From a metal supplier, you're thinking, all right, how are you going to? Everyone had a great show, and the buyers are buying, and the wholesalers and the manufacturers selling. But it's always about the metal. People think from a metal standpoint, whoever they're using as a vendor partner, that it's almost like a spigot. You turn it on, and the water's always going to come out. Well, that's not always true because the metal's just getting absorbed. It's just getting used, and literally, and it's to a point, Andrea. It's about the piece of paper. They really want the piece of paper. Okay.
So everybody's covering their butt.
Right. They want the CYA. So they want the piece of paper of the certifications and the transfer papers and all that stuff. So if they're asked by their auditors or they're asked by their customer, that they're covered.
Our industry doesn't make disposable products. It's not like pop cans where, you use it once and then you responsibly dispose of it and then it gets reprocessed and it turns into another pop can. We make product that's got longevity, that's supposed to last a lifetime. Well, if you're taking product and material out of the supply chain, something has to feed that. It's got to come back at some point as new feedstock.
So do you guys think the real solution is to try to make sure that I was just going to ask a question that can't be answered. Because the problem is, you don't, when it's in a bar form, you just don't know where it came from. Is there any technology that can tell us where the components of a bar came from?
No, that's kind of like trying to figure out where, air atoms come from. Everything, all of it is now in one or two locations that's passing through the investment world and then filtering back into the physical.
There's just got to be I'm telling you, a place where it's just like enough. Like we can't go much farther. I mean, we just don't have the technology to literally, like Superman, the X-ray vision to find out where this metal came from. The metal that's here is the metal that's here. I think I heard once that all the metal that's ever come out of the ground, gold, is like a 50 by 50 by 50 cubic yards. Like take a football field and just cut it in half. And that's how much gold's actually come out of the ground. And that's been used and recycled and repurposed. Most people's, believe it or not, their engagement rings, their wedding rings, the jewelry you're wearing right now, it's been repurposed, it's been remelted, it's been recycled. It's not brand new gold. You're already wearing recycled material under the current definition.
So going back to your original comment, just make sure it's non-conflict responsible. Would there be enough, are there metals that you could be refining now that you know are non-conflict responsible, but which are not currently allowed under your recycled definitions, and what are they?
From our standpoint, it really comes down to like the feed. We only refine in jewelry and pawn. So for us to do in going to other processes, to add a whole other process into your facility, let alone if you have the space, the money, the capital resources, we don't, like I said, for us, we don't refine for any of those other products. So we can only take the jewelry byproducts in the pawn. And that helps us with our certifications because it's very easy when they come in.
It's fair work.
Yeah, 100%. But remember, when these auditors come in, now I'm going to date myself here. They're young. They come out of college, and what happens is this is a lot of times their first jobs is being an auditor. So what happens is a lot of times what Ken was saying, you're bringing in these auditors. Our first part of the first couple of days is there is actually educating them on what we do and what it's all about. I mean, sometimes they're thrown into it and they're making decisions on your livelihood. From United, we have 103 people. So the things that they say and all that we have to do, we have to deal with, we have to make sure that we can keep functioning, that, to be honest with you, that we don't get shut down under the paperwork police, that we're covered. And it is scary. We're afraid to rock the boat. We want to do the right thing. That's, I think, for every company, especially, they always want to do the right thing. The intent is to do the right thing. The problem is we're just pushing it so far that we have to have so much paperwork. I mean, new computer systems. I mean, we're old school too. We're making paper backup copies of this stuff. So when some person 2 years from now asks, where did you get this? We can answer it.
You can answer it. So what does the solution look like? Is it just having more honest conversations about what recycled really is?
I don't think right now there is a solution. I don't think there's a long-term solution. I think that there's going to be surprise and confusion in the not too distant future. Otherwise what you have is is I have a relationship with Dave and Dave's company, and I have a relationship with Ken and Ken's company. So I'm already in their system for what I need and my requirements. But at some point, Dave and Ken are going to have to stand there and say, we can't take on new customers for this product line. If I'm going to support my current customers and the customers that have been loyal to me, then I have to support them and continue my relationship with them. And new startups, new entities will be looking for that kind of relationship, and it won't be available.
You know, I would agree with Linus, not to cut you off, Ken, I would agree with Linus, like, we, as a company, we're trying to save our metal for our customers. We get customers all the time, especially bullion customers. What I mean by that, they want the gold too. They can't get it, either they'll call us up, the coins, bars, they want to buy bullion. Like, we can't sell you bullion. We don't have enough. We really want to save it for our jewelry customers for the order. I mean, that's really what it is. So we're really picking and choosing. And that's exactly what Linus says, and I'm not sure exactly.
I think the SBS should be in some of the conversations. I mean, I've seen many conversations at various events, and they're not there. They're dictating a lot of the rules. Let's hear from them.
We can invite SCS. We know who's in those departments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. It brings that transparency.
Well, and it's funny because in some ways, like, I work so much in responsible jewelry, movement practices, and some of this conversation makes me feel like it makes my stomach in knots, thinking about this. But the reality is the reality. And so we need to have these conversations. The transparency in conversation is going to precede any real changes in practice.
I mean,
yes.
Dave's talking about educating them. I literally had to educate them on what karat gold was.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know. So that pretty much says it all. We had to have conversations about how things are made, how things are mixed. It's not just like where it comes from. And so, they take a total of everything we have. There's a lot of Excel spreadsheets and this and that. So it's an education for all at every level, in my opinion. And so it just continues. It's a work in progress. This is, the beginning and the start, in my opinion.
And yet you guys are still doing it and it's an administrative burden on your companies because customers want this. Do you just think customers don't know what it is?
I think there's some confusion. Well, I will say this. We do a lot of, at United, we do a tremendous amount of jewelry shows. Okay. So we try to support the industry that supports us. I always ask the retailers, one of my first questions is, do your customers ask about recycled metal or where the gold or where the silver came from? I've yet to find a retailer tell me they asked. Now, what happens, you might get one that we're looking for the mine, but they don't ask about recycled metal or all that stuff. They'll ask about a diamond, they'll ask about lab grown, they'll ask about, the Blood Diamond movie or whatever they saw on Netflix or whatever. They'll ask about that, but for the metal, they don't ask. That's why sometimes I think the jewelry industry, this is a self-imposed problem.
It's a follow the leader. So, the big guys, the public companies, the top tier that have set these programs up for whatever reason that they decided to do that. And then.
Well, because they are getting consumer pressure. There is consumer pressure for more responsible supply chains. And if you're a company like LVMH, you're selling a lot of products to that one consumer. They're not just selling an engagement ring to a consumer. They are selling a handbag and a belt and shoes and a shirt and some lifestyle goods for the home and jewelry. And so they're being very uniform and saying, okay, responsible supply chains matter to our customers, and we can't just apply it in one area and not apply it in another. And frankly, mines are a lot more damaging to people in places, or at least have been historically, still are in places, than cotton.
That's true. But again, somebody has to have some sort of feedstock to supply.
Right. So having honest conversations is more the solution. But
yeah, this is coming from everyone wants to know where everything's from. It's not 20 years ago. Everything's more transparent. You can see where you go to the grocery store and now there's a sticker on there on your avocado, what country it came from. If you want to watch, Dave mentioned Netflix, you want to look at avocados and where they came from, you can see the conflict that goes on there and all the dirty dealings that's going down from south of the border to in this country. So it's not just metal, it's everything, and people don't want to see that. And I agree. It's not going to go away. So we have to be able to do our best. This is the struggle time. This is the tough time. You know, because not everyone's on board. In fact, the majority is not on board. So we had enough of our customers ask us. We assumed because their customers were asking them. So we had enough. After a few years, or 5, 10 years, we finally got on board. You know, and we said, this is what's it going to take. So we went through the 3 years of not being 100%, and now we are. But it's still a struggle. There's no question that we feel the pain and the price, you know, because pricing in the jewelry is huge. I mean, everyone makes a pretty good product. Everyone's making good products. Dave makes a good product. We make a good product. Hoover and Strong. You can name them all. It's all about customer service, but it's all about price in the bottom line, and that's what really dictates.
Well, now we're going to have new pressure, though, because now in the jewelry industry, when we did respond to pressure from more responsible sources, it was because of the Blood Diamonds movie. So people saw people getting hurt, and that really pushed the buttons. And as a country, we wanted to fight about whether or not there was climate change for a really long time. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but people stopped fighting about 5 years ago. So now we're really talking climate change. So these new ESG regulations that are going to be imposed on public companies are going to increase this pressure, not decrease it. So public companies have to report where their material came from. Who does that affect? Their downstream suppliers. And by next year, the downstream suppliers are going to have that transparency. So I don't see it going away, and I don't think it's necessarily a jewelry industry imposed problem, but it is a problem we have to figure out how to solve.
Well, look how everyone is like electric cars, electric this. Just Google or go on TikTok or YouTube and look at a lithium mine.
Oh, rare earth metals are going to be a big issue.
Look at a lithium mine and just see how much farther ahead our industry is compared to that. And this is supposed to be green, clean, the electrical and stuff like that. They're the worst.
And
There's nothing green about a cellular phone or any kind of phone.
Nope.
I'm sorry to say, people, but like we're not going to drop our phones, are we? Right? And what's in the phone? Just all I got to do is Google it. Lithium's
well, and rare earth metal mining is going to become it's already a problem because of some of the areas that it's happening in and the advantage that's being taken of those areas. So it is the next real area of potential crisis for mining. So, gosh, I said I was going to start with the down stuff, but but I think it's good for us to all understand what this looks like and the challenges of solving it, because we need. It's not about saying, okay, fine, we can't solve this, forget it. It's about saying it's going to take more than 2 of our metal producers committing to, because as much as I hear you saying this really sucks, you're also doing it.
He's Dave saying.
But you're also doing it. You're paying the money. You're doing the work. You're hiring the staff to do it. And what we need is more people in the industry working together to figure out how to solve these problems so that we don't have a couple of leaders carrying the bag alone.
Listen, I agree with you. If this event, not being live streamed, was more, if the metal suppliers and the casters do that, you'd have standing room only here. They'd all be here listening because they're all going through it. It's not going away. It's a big problem, and it's just because I'm telling you, from what we see and what I've asked, and we can debate this, the consumer is not asking where the metal came from. They're just not. They're not going to the retail jewelry stores and asking.
It depends on which retailer you talk to and which designer you talk to. And remember that there are entire communities of people. And the retail jewelry store, it tends to be behind the curve on things like this. I'll just be honest. So online sellers are seeing big sales lifts from being very forward about selling responsible metals, whether it's recycled or whether they do something like Fairmind or another artisanal mining project.
It's online. Who's checking them out? Who even knows where it's being
Well,
produced?
some of them are really legitimate,
Right.
like
Is
Brilliant
it being
Earth.
produced in Mumbai? Is it going in Thailand? Is it in China?
Some of them can tell you. You go to Brilliant Earth and you'll see an entire responsible,
And I think
supply
that's
chain
more of a
group in
direction
place.
is responsible. I think Dave said it earlier.
Yep.
And you need to have a supply chain that is not impacting either the environment or the earth or wherever your position is. It just needs to be responsibly sourced.
Well, and to your point, who is monitoring that? People can just make claims. We've just made claims for a long time. The green guides are going up for review for the first time in 20 years. What it means to greenwash is going to, be further defined, and it's not going to get easier. But how do we monitor all that? So that's another piece. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about what else is happening in metal. Are you hearing people asking for different metal combinations? Are you seeing more? I'm shifting to the whole, unless you had something you wanted to add.
No, I think on metals, people always come to the trade show booths. What's new? What's new? What's new? What's new? It's hard with metals, okay? Because what happens, there's only so much you can do with it. There's only so much, certain metals, it's almost like a family affair. Certain metals don't get along with other metals. It's like a holiday at the house sometimes. One relative needs to stay away from the other.
Unless you do mokume. Then you make that into an art.
But mostly, which is a very, very small percentage of this. But so what happens is we always try to go back to the basics. People ask, what's new in yellow? We make 20 shades of yellow. I think we need one. We make 20 different shades of the yellow color. So what happens is white, green, pink. Those are the mainstays. Pink was popular for a long time. Overseas, it's popular. Pink, green is never really taken on, really the way what it could. People have asked us, and I think Linus and Ken they've asked us for purple, they've asked us for blue, they've asked us for black. And every time I'll tell them we don't make it. Metallurgically, it doesn't work. You have to add aluminum, which makes it too brittle and all that stuff. And they're like, no, I read something on the internet. All right, Dr. Google, yes, it probably can be made. We just can't make it.
Some is made, it's just, there's so many limitations, right? I think you worked with some purple gold, right?
Yeah,
but it's just
wind
the
up with
limitations
physical
are-
limitations.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like what?
Yeah.
Describe that, because I think for people who don't think about metallurgy and what you have to add to gold and how it changes the workability, so describe why purple gold is difficult to work with.
Purple is a very simple formula. It's essentially a 1-to-1 ratio between a gold atom and an aluminum atom. But as you produce and you get to that ratio, you get ordering in the molecular level of the crystal structure. So that's what produces that purple color. But because of that ordering, there's no mechanical properties to it at all. So it's a ceramic metallic. You can't bend it, you can't weld it, you can't shape it, you can't form it. You've essentially made essentially a metallic gem that you could set, you could inlay, you could do things like that. But
Can you machine it?
you can machine it, yeah. But that's all you can do with it. So you have to start with some sort of billet and then move forward. I think that the changes and advancements we're going to see is more alloy development for very specific purposes or very specific processes. So we're going to see more advancements in more exotic material to have a direct impact on a characteristic. And there's a lot of money and a lot of testing and engineering now that's going on for just that kind of situation.
Can you give an example of a kind of characteristic somebody might be going after and how they chase that with an alloy?
Hardness.
Okay.
So if you've got a material, you've got sterling silver, and you want to make it more durable. So we're looking at new element additions in very small amounts that will have that impact that you're looking for. Or it may not just be hardness, but maybe it's machinability. You want to be able to take material and get a better machine product, or make it easier to machine, create a little smaller chip or a curl or whatever you're looking for. So those kind of processes are what's going to dictate the new range of innovation in metals.
Because for silver, I mean, it's sterling, so 925 is the purity. So we have to work with 7.5% to something in that 7.5% that changes. And that's why 20 years ago you saw deox metals with germanium, and, a couple other things where they removed some of the copper and they put other metals in there. And it was supposed to, and at that point, the push 25 years ago was to get silver to stop tarnishing, to really start tarnishing. I don't want my silver to tarnish. Like, all silver is going to tarnish. It just is. So what happens is we've tried metals, and I tell people when you see the deox metals, it's more tarnish resistant. Doesn't mean it won't tarnish. It just means more tarnish resistant. So what Linus is true is now you might have to get to the point where the metal can only do so much. What are some of the processes that can help in the hard? And silver, he's 100% right. People are always looking for the hardness on the silver. And there's only so much we can do metallurgically to make it harder and still user-friendly that it can be casted or fabricated.
And not rhodium plated.
And not rhodium.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the holy grail, is to not have to rhodium plate it. Just make people not want white gold that looks like platinum. That's the answer. Stop wanting, if you want platinum, buy platinum. Is it all? Yeah, I kind of lost the way I wanted to ask that question. I'm thinking of what you might add to silver. I guess my question is it true that when you add some materials, you might add one aspect of workability, but you also have to sacrifice something?
But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Some of these alloys are going to be developed that now will be only for a rolling or stamping operation. They won't be castable. So some of these, micro additions, we might, and you're working completely outside of the box now. You're talking about adding tungsten, or you're adding magnesium. So some of those additions aren't friendly in all processes. So, and your processes are going to become more and more based on technology. So, and we saw this when I was working with the Palladium Alliance on palladium alloys. We developed alloys that were more castable or cast friendly, but they had to be done in an induction machine. You couldn't torch melt them. So now you start segregating the ability of certain manufacturers against other manufacturers.
And also on Linus' point is, it's a twofold process when you're playing with mixed metals, because not only you have to create it from the production standpoint, but then when they send it in for refining. So now what happens is you've got other metals introduced that might hurt your typical refining process, or people don't understand why they can't get paid on it because it's so small. We know it's in there because we have the technology to identify it's in there, but that doesn't mean we can get it out. And so whenever you start playing, years ago, we created a sterling silver with gold in it, a sterling silver with platinum in it, a sterling silver with palladium in it. We called them different names from the marketing aspect and all that stuff. Yes, it worked for some of the designers and all that stuff, but it never hit mainstream because people would see the cost and all that stuff. And then when it would come back to us, and you got a sterling silver where it's got a quarter percent of gold in it, and they're like, well, why ain't I getting paid on the gold? I'm like, well, there's just not enough in there. So whenever you develop a metal, and not only that, then if we develop a metal that goes really successful from a casting stuff, but then all of a sudden Ken's customers are asking, well, I need sizing stock that matches this, I need solders that match this. It's like, well, what are you going to do?
That happened with the Carrot and Gold Deox, where we were adding. Back many years ago, people were not using the closed induction systems; they were torch melting. So we had the Deox that we added to that, and that would help break out clean out of the investment. That would save them time, but you couldn't roll that. You couldn't. It was more brittle because there was those additives in there. And so now actually we're selling less of that Deox, and so I push them towards just the general same color, just without the Deox in there, and because they're casting mostly. They're casting in an induction machine. It's mostly enclosed, so it's got the inert atmosphere. It's fine. And then they can also roll it. So they can pour it if they want, pour a little bar or however, but it's a all-around good alloy.
Well, and it's always a problem with and this happens with even seasoned industry veterans, people who've been around a long time. They will order a metal, a sheet wire, a fabricated product for making jewelry or casting grade, and not understand that what you say its purpose is for in your product catalog is actually its purpose. And then they get frustrated because they try to use it for another manufacturing process and it doesn't work, and there's something wrong with the metal.
It's always the metal. It's always the metal's fault.
I actually think it's the manufacturer. Okay. Ken, what do you think?
It's true. The first thing is, I've been doing this for 40 years. That's the first line that they want to say. But that, I think what people have to realize is that, when you're making new designs and new things, that your process changes. So documentation of process is crucial for at any level, in my opinion. So if you're going to make something and you've been doing it all along, and it's the same metal, and then you change your design into something else, you're going to have to change your sprue system. And Linus will probably talk more about it, but you can't just do the same sprue for everything. And that's just basic, though. You should know that, but somehow, some way, it's lost in translation. And I still get those calls, and I still, let me talk about sprueing, because the first things you check is their flash temperature, is their melt temperature, and all the basics. I call them the vitals, just so
Water temperature.
Yeah, everything. But the sprue is crucial, and how the metal is going to fly.
How
I
it
remember
flows.
in the Santa Fe Symposium, some 15 years ago, they had a simulation of how the metal solidifies in the flask. It was amazing to watch how things, because no one thinks or talks about that. We were able to see it. It was incredible. And so, yeah.
And it didn't follow logic
No,
or what
it didn't follow logic, right.
It didn't follow what you thought it was going to do.
Exactly.
You have to understand thermodynamics to understand how metal flows, and most people just don't study that.
And the problem is as we sell new technology, software designing systems to design a piece of jewelry, and we're going to grow it. We're going to grow it on a machine, and we're going to make an unbelievable piece. Ask most casters, they'll walk by the screen and they see this great ring, and they're like, I can't cast that. I can't cast that. I can't cast that. Yeah, but the software system said it's good. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't translate to actually some guy who's actually going to cast it.
Yeah, where are you going to put that sprue? Or do you really want us to cast it if I have to put 7 screws on this little ring? So I do want to remind everybody that your metals providers can answer your questions. So if you're thinking of buying a metal and you are going to use it for a specific purpose and you're not sure which one to buy, ask. Or if you're thinking of switching a metal, your casting grade, for instance, ask, because they can talk to you about the dynamics of those metals that you're buying and help you make a better choice from within their catalog.
And when they can't, come over and see me, Ken, and we'll answer it.
And I think part of that, what you just touched on, is ask first. So before you go
trash
out,
the flask.
or before you go out and buy a new casting machine or some addition or change to your process, ask beforehand rather than have to deal with that consequence afterwards.
Well, I'm thinking of a client that a large manufacturer had a casting problem that went on for years and probably cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Linus went out for me to analyze it, and it was a simple problem, wasn't it?
It's very simple, yeah. And it's mostly just not understanding how processes and materials behave simultaneously together.
Yep. It's science.
It's
metallurgy
all
science.
It's just cooking.
It's just cooking. Your cooking tastes better.
Yeah, it's all about following a recipe. So those are all my food analogies. You can't, if you're gonna make a Michelin star dinner, then there is a very precise recipe and formula you have to follow to be able to achieve that kind of results. And making jewelry is exactly the same. You have to produce and document that process and follow it to the T.
If you want repeatable results.
If you want to have a Michelin dinner, that's what you have to do.
Or just admit you're experimenting and you're not going to be mad at anybody if it doesn't work out.
There's that too. You have to experiment and
You need both. You do need both.
You have 3 experiments. You got to know what you did with 1, 2, and 3. So you are documenting this.
You've never paid for a Michelin dinner in your life. at some restaurant. There's
I've
no
had,
way
I've
you
had,
would pay me
I've
for
had
it.
several
No
Michelin
way.
dinners
I
with
can't
you.
believe they
No,
waited this
I'm
long to
telling
find
you,
it.
seriously. You think of Michelin, you think of tires, being from Detroit?
All right, guys, we're almost out of time. What's one last thing you'd like to share with our live and digital audiences about metal?
I'll actually go a little bit above that, and I'll be like, you really want to learn about metal and stuff like that? You should be coming to a show like MJSA. Because what happens, you can talk to experts that are available for 3 days. You're not getting on the phone, you're building that relationship, it's face to face. Everything you need here, there's contract casters, there's metal suppliers, there's everything you need to actually have the conversation about metals right in this place. And this is a great venue to have it. And I think if more people, and especially the people that are seeing us on live stream, could actually get to the show, I think that it's only going to help them in their careers.
University of Trade Show. It is a real thing.
You want to dive into more of this kind of conversation? Come and see the three of us at the Jewelry Symposium. We'll all be there.
Yeah, I mean, the education is key here. And like what I've learned at the symposium dating back from 1996, my first time, I was very green. I was a guy who worked in the shop for 5-6 years, didn't know a phase diagram from anything, went to the symposium the first year, learned about casting, read about all the papers and everything, and then eventually went to GIA and married those two together, where you take what you learn, what you read, and then you work it with your hands, and you do the casting and you do the thing. It helps makes you understand everything. The symposium that Linus and his group's going is crucial to the jewelry industry, and what Eddie Bell did for the first how many years? 34 is an amazing thing, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I like when it always gets shaken up, and it's getting shaken up now a little bit, and we'll see how it turns out. But I'm pretty excited about where that's going to go. So it's all about education. There's just so many levels. It's endless.
And when I said at the beginning, people often ask, how are you going to talk about metals for an hour? And I say, you can talk about it for 3 days. You can learn about metals every day for the rest of your jewelry career and still have some things to learn. And that needs to be part of the commitment to being, the best jeweler you can be. All right. Well, thank you to Ken Babayan with WHL and Linus Drogs, AU Enterprises, and Dave Savinsky with United Precious Metals. This is my Metalicious panel, and you fulfilled every hope that I had for an interesting discussion. And I do want to encourage everybody to tune in tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time for our discussion of the new Fairmine Credits Program, another way of getting more responsible metals to the jewelry industry, maybe take some of the pressure off. And that's it for now. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.